Hi, my name is Reen Kasulker. I am an IT consultant and an IT meeting coach. And today I am going to show you one of my favorite techniques to prioritize any project list or portfolio when you don't have criteria available to get the prioritization done. At any time, you can feel free to tweet your questions to hashtag PM Meeting Coach, and I will get those and I will be happy to come back and respond to you. You can also download a cheat sheet which contains an outline of the steps that I use to prioritize any project list without criteria just by clicking on the button below. So let's get started. One of the things we're going to cover today is we are going to identify issues that stop you from prioritizing your project list or your portfolio. Then we are going to review the 5 steps to prioritize any list or portfolio when you don't have any criteria available. And last but not least, I will take you through a demonstration on exactly the way that I get groups to prioritize these lists when they don't have any criteria available. So, first I would like to know, what is it that is stopping you from prioritizing your list or your portfolio? These are some of the answers that I typically get. Number one is no initial project list or portfolio. That seems obvious, but if you're going to prioritize a list of projects, you have to have one to start with. Another thing that stops people from prioritizing lists are no ranking criteria. So maybe you actually have a list, but you don't have any criteria to rank it, or you can't get your team to agree on criteria, or you can't get your sponsors to agree on the most important criteria to use. In fact, I've seen teams spend more time debating and arguing about the criteria than the actual projects on the list. So today I'm going to show you exactly the steps that I take to avoid that. Number three, you have a list. Maybe you even have some criteria that you want to use, but you don't have enough information regarding the projects that are in the portfolio or on the list. The technique that I use will not stop you even if you don't have enough information. In fact, this process or these steps work even better if you don't have a lot of information. Number four, no business strategy or direction. Right? We all want to sync up our list and our portfolio with the business strategy to make them or to help them get to where they want to go. But maybe we can't get the business to articulate their strategy, or we're not sure where they're going, and therefore we can't decide which IT projects are most important to help them get there. And I also hear a lot of my colleagues in IT say that they can't prioritize their list because they just don't have the support or buy-in from management. So, does this list look familiar to you? Are these some of the things that stop you from prioritizing your list? If you have some other items that we didn't mention, just send me a tweet at hashmark PM Meeting Coach, and I would love to hear what some of the other items are that are stopping you from prioritizing your list. Now, there are 5 steps that I use to prioritize any list without criteria. And the first thing I want to tell you is this is real. I have spent several years working with IT teams in corporate America. I've worked for some of the largest corporations in America, worked in the project management office. I've worked with project managers. I've been a project manager. I've done consulting and facilitation on hundreds and hundreds of projects, and I've helped project teams prioritize. And I eventually worked with some of my colleagues to come up with this process when we had trouble ranking our portfolios because we couldn't agree to criteria. So this is the result of that frustration that I had after years and years of experience working with project managers who didn't have the criteria to rank their list. So what are the 5 steps? It's like magic. That's why I have a magician on the screen. And the first step is to make an initial project list. Okay, if we're going to prioritize our list or prioritize our portfolio, we have to start with an initial list. So, step one, make an initial project list. Don't be afraid. Don't get bogged down in detail. Just get that initial list, and I'll teach you how to work with it. Number two, we need to assemble the experts, assemble the stakeholders, assemble the decision makers. We need to bring these people together. If we're going to rank this list without criteria, then we have to have some conversations. And so we need to bring people together. And again, I will give you some detail and tips to do that and to make it easy. Next, we want to generate discussion. All right. Again, we have a list. We have no criteria. So we're bringing people together and we want to generate discussion, make some decisions about which projects we think are most important. And then I want to, or I often use a facilitation technique called forced ranking. So the fourth step in our process is to initiate forced ranking. And in our demonstration later, I will show you how we do that. And last but not least, we want to compile the results. So if we go through the trouble of ranking a list, all right, we make an initial list, we assemble the experts, we generate discussion, we engage those participants in forced ranking, they actually come up with a list. You better compile the results and do something with them. And you may say, yeah, Irene, that's really obvious, but I can assure you, I have worked with clients who go through these steps, and then when they get the list, they're not sure what to do with it. So the first thing you need to do is compile the results and share them with people. And I will give you some tips for that as well. So you may be asking right now, Reen, you know, does this really work? And before I even show you um, some of the techniques I use to implement the 5 steps, I want to share with you some real comments from real participants. And I have used this process myself. I have used it with large groups. I have used it with small groups. I have used it on lists of maybe 2 to 300 projects. I've used it on small lists with only 6 projects. I have trained many of my project management colleagues to use this, and I've even trained a lot of our business partners to use this too. So I want to stress this is not some theory. This is real. This is a real process, and here's what some of our participants have had to say. Number one, some people really like this a lot better than point values. And what we found is that a lot of your participants would rather argue about the point values, or they feel like they're hostage to what someone else felt was important when they put weighted point values in a tool. So a lot of participants who use this technique really like this better than using point values. Some of our participants have said that the process was much better than expected. In fact, a lot of them come in to our ranking meeting very skeptical and they think that it's not going to work. But when we survey them after, a lot of them tell us that the process was actually better than expected and the results much better than expected. One person in one of the very first meetings I facilitated using this technique said that it was very basic but very necessary. And I can't stress this enough. If you're at a point where you need to prioritize a list and you don't have any criteria and you don't have any way to do it, start with the basics. And again, as this participant mentioned, it was very basic, but it was also very necessary. Number four, we do a lot of preparation that helps the group to be productive. So the more time we put into preparation, the more it's going to pay off. Once you become familiar with this technique, you'll be surprised. You don't have to spend a ton of time preparing after you are very comfortable with the technique, but maybe your first or first few prioritization sessions, put in some time and prepare so that you're comfortable leading your group. And number five, one participant really liked the fact that small groups did a good job of picking initial pairs, as evidenced by items not moving much after the first round. And that sounds very unfamiliar to you right now, but the key there is that we will show you some tips and techniques to break your large list into smaller lists and to break your large groups into smaller groups and to rely on them to come up with some of the items that need to be ranked. And the way we have designed this process, those groups do a really good job of identifying some of the most important items initially, and it saves us a lot of time throughout the ranking process. And again, we'll go into more detail on that in just a few slides. But this is a very real process, a very real technique. It's also a very simple technique, and it may scare you initially when you see how simple it is. So I encourage you to download the cheat sheet and also watch this video a couple of times and then try it with a small list and a small group of people. And the more comfortable you get, the more you will really like this and you will see that it works. All right, so let's talk a little bit. We said the first step was to make an initial project list, and I just want to give you a few tips on that before we get into the demo. So first thing you need to do is you need to ask your decision makers, your subject matter experts, your stakeholders, whatever you want to call them. You need to ask them to provide some initial items that are going to be prioritized, and preferably you do this before you have a prioritization meeting. Now, you can generate a list during your meeting if you don't have one going in. That's an advanced technique. But the very first thing that I recommend you do is ask your key decision makers to start providing some initial items that are going to need to be prioritized. All right. Number two, this is contrary to common belief. Don't worry about the size of that initial list because we're going to show you how to break it down and pare it down. Also, what happens if you start to worry about the size of the initial list, it's very easy to, number one, start to turn people off and discredit them before you even get to the ranking process. And second, you start to impose some criteria on your participants or on your stakeholders, and they're saying, hey, wait a minute, I thought we were going to prioritize this list without any criteria, and now you're giving me criteria. Where did that criteria come from? So people will start to get distracted if you start to put limits on the size of the initial list. So open it up. Don't worry about dependencies. Don't worry about priorities. Don't worry about any of those things. Just collect a list. Don't worry about how big it is. We will shrink it down later. All right. Next, don't get bogged down in criteria. Remember, we don't have any criteria, so don't put a lot of initial criteria out there. Just take what people give you, and we'll show you how to work with it. Number four, this one blows people away. Um, the name of the project and a brief description are really all you need to get started. So don't get carried away with detail. You're probably not going to get it. That's probably why you're watching this video in the first place. So don't worry about a lot of detail on these projects. The name of the project and the description are enough to help you get started. And if possible, try to keep the names of the projects to 3 to 5 words. And I'll show you why that is important in some of our later steps. So make that initial list. Don't get bogged down in the size. Don't get bogged down in criteria. Keep it really brief and name these projects 3 to 5 words if possible. All right, so what are we going to do next? Here's a sample. And when we generated our very first list, um, we had information for some projects and not others. We had criteria for some projects. We had ROI. We had we had a lot of different pieces of information for a lot of different projects, and we didn't have all of the information for all of the projects. So when you make that initial list, project name, very brief description, and some additional notes if you have some. And I have a criteria there in case you learn something like the project is mandated or whatever. But that's just a place for you to put notes. But project name and description are really all you need. Later when we do the demo, I'm going to use cities as projects. So in this list we'd have Project Albuquerque, Project Anaheim, Project Anchorage, and so on. All right, so keep that initial list simple. So the second step is to assemble the experts, and yes, that means have a meeting. Remember though, you are just facilitating this meeting. You don't have to be an expert on all of these projects. You don't have to be an expert on all of these things. This is a meeting that you can facilitate. This is a meeting anyone can facilitate. I have taught many, many, many people to facilitate these project prioritization meetings. Some of the people I've taught are not facilitators. In fact, a lot of them are project managers or portfolio managers. not trained facilitators, that's fine. We build a lot of the facilitation into the technique and the process. You just have to be comfortable with the process and the rest will take care of itself. So we are going to have a meeting. We're going to have to bring the experts together. You determine who those experts are. Now let's go through a few tips. Number one, as I just mentioned, you're going to have to actually plan a meeting. If there's no criteria and you're going to do some ranking and you want buy-in, then you're going to have to bring some people together. That means putting them in the room and having a meeting. Okay. Number two, you're going to invite anybody who you think is necessary to make a decision. The big tip here is don't worry about having too many people in the room. We will show you how to handle them. Okay. So it's in this case, it's better to get buy-in. It's better to have a lot of people if that's what you think you need to get buy-in for this list. And we can always limit the number of people who are going to be voting, but don't worry about trying to limit the number of people you're going to have at that meeting. Okay. Number three, make sure we tell them what they're going to be doing in the meeting. And I'm going to go into more detail on this in a few minutes. It sounds obvious, but you'll see what we mean when we get into detail. Number four, this is one of our favorites. We also like to tell our participants what they are not going to do in the meeting. In fact, I think that's almost as important as what we are going to do. And that's because a lot of people have a lot of misconceptions about what's going on with these portfolios and what's going on with this list. So we actually spend some time, maybe 30 seconds, telling them what they are not going to do. That allows us to focus on what we are going to do. Okay, and again, I'll give you an example when we do the demo. And number five, consider small group work if you have a large group of people or you have a large list. Small groups are one of the fastest ways for you to shrink your group, or I'm sorry, to shrink your list down and to get to the most important information. So consider small group work to shrink your group and to increase participation. Okay, and again, we'll cover that in the demo. So here's a sample agenda. We might start out with introductions. We're going to talk about the purpose of the meeting. Number three, we're going to talk about what we will and will not be doing in our meeting today. Then we're going to go into a small group discussion, followed by a large group ranking exercise. After we've done that to the group satisfaction, we will review our prioritized project list and we will discuss next steps. Now, I know that sounds very basic. Gang, this is a very basic process. It's a very, very basic process. And our goal is to get you a prioritized list with some buy-in, and it works every time. Okay? So, let me give you a few more tips. Okay, first we want to define the purpose of the meeting. And often I tell my groups the purpose of this meeting is to create a prioritized list of IT projects using only the resources that we currently have in this room. And the resources we have in this room right now, we have the initial list, we have the knowledge of all the people in the room, and we have a process to put the knowledge and the list together and figure out what the priorities are. That's what we're going to do today. That is the purpose of this meeting. We are going to get it done. All right? Now, I also tell them what we are not going to do today. We are not here to approve projects. Okay, this is not an approval meeting. This is a prioritization meeting. We are not going to be approving or rejecting projects. So, as I said, we're not shutting them down. Okay, we're not approving them. We are not allocating IT resources today. All we are doing is creating a prioritized list, trying to get a feel for what is most important to you. And again, that can be you, the business, you, the key stakeholders. It can be whoever you decided to invite to this meeting. I typically like to bring in people who are representing the business as well as people who are representing IT so we can have a really good discussion and the business is represented. But we're not allocating resources today. In fact, we might not even have estimates as to what it would take to get these projects done. And I even go a step further and I tell teams I work with not to do any estimates on the projects until after they understand the priorities. And I do that because if we have a list of 200 projects, I don't want my technical architects to spend hours and hours sifting through 200 projects trying to figure out what some of the technical requirements and the architectural fit might be if we're not even going to work on some of those projects, right? In our shop, we may only work on 10, 15, or 20 of those projects a year. So why allocate all of my resources to go through specs and proposals on 200 projects if projects 100 through 200 aren't even going to be touched, okay? With that said, last thing I tell my teams that I do this with is that we are not going to pass due to lack of information. We are not going to approve projects. We're not going to shut down projects. We're not going to allocate resources. And we're not going to pass due to lack of information. We're not even going to go back and get more information. We are going to what? Go back up to number one. We are going to create a prioritized list using only the resources that we currently have in this room. Now, remember, list is a starting point for future discussion. It's not the end all be all, but it is going to give us an idea what some of the priorities are. It is going to give us an idea of where we have to go back and um, get more detail on architectural fit and create estimates. And okay, this is the starting point, but it's going to allow us to start with the projects that are most important. Okay, so next, step three, we said we want to generate discussion. A lot of portfolio managers and project managers that I work with get very nervous because imagine what's happening. You might already be thinking this. You're saying, Reen, I've got this huge list with more projects than I wanted. I don't know anything about them. I don't know the dependencies. I don't have any estimates. I don't know how much they're going to cost. I don't know how long they're going to take. I don't know if they're a priority. And I've got more people in this room than I want, and now you're telling me to generate some discussion. Why would I ever want to do that? All right. Well, first thing you have to do is you have to give these decision makers or participants time to discuss the list. They have to be able to start to talk about this list. And remember, if you are overwhelmed with this list, they're going to be overwhelmed too. And that's actually a good thing because we want to get them in the mindset of paring this list down. We want to get them in the mindset of understanding that we have to prioritize this list so that we can work on the most important things, not necessarily everything. Number two, when we're having these discussions, we encourage our participants to focus on what we have, not what we're missing. And we mentioned earlier, what is it that we have? We have a list and we have knowledge. And we're going to rely heavily upon the knowledge and the instinct and the professional opinions of the people that are in the room. Okay? We're going to let them have discussion because we want them to work through some of the barriers, some of the risks, and some of the obstacles. This is not a risk assessment workshop. It's not a risk analysis, but we do want them to talk about some of the constraints that may come up naturally during their discussion. We are going to make sure we discuss the overall process steps with our large group that we're working with. And again, we're going to use small group discussion to shrink the list and also increase participation. So now let me kind of give you an example. Um, let's say that we have 24 people that we are going to invite to this meeting to go over this list. We have 100 projects that are on the list, and they have absolutely no criteria. Okay, all we really have are the 24 people, 100 projects. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to ask them, after I've gone through the agenda and done all the housekeeping, I'm going to ask the group to discuss items that might be helpful in decision making based on their knowledge. So, for example, um, do we know if any of these projects are mandates? Do we know if any of these projects are tied to top priorities or strategic initiative, right? We're just going to ask them if there are any items they might want to use in their discussions that will help them in their decision making based on something that they already know or based on something they have in the room. Okay, and what I have found is this is a great starting point because people will start with a list of things they would love, almost like a wish list. It'd be really great for us to have ROI. And then I ask them, okay, so in this case, do we have the ROI? Well, no, we don't. Okay, well, we still have to rank these projects, but we could take the projects that are at the top of the list after this meeting and go back and see if we can put together some estimates and figure out what return on investment might be, okay? The goal is to keep bringing them back to the reality of the fact that we are going to do this prioritization without any external data, all right? But let them discuss it. Let them get comfortable with it because initially they won't be comfortable. So they decide in this scenario, in fact, we took this from a real scenario. The group decided that legal mandates are important. They decided that anything that might have already been flagged as a division priority from the business is important. And even though they didn't have ROI, they wanted to include perceived benefit. All right, and you're saying, Maureen, they're going to argue more about perceived benefit. Hey, that's okay. We're giving them a forum and a format to have those discussions. All right. So after they have that initial discussion on, you know, items they may want to feature in their decision making, and again, I'm pretty loose with that piece. That is really more to get them comfortable with the process and address their concerns than is to make any decisions at that point. So they've had that first discussion. Next thing I want to do, this is a large group of 24 people. I want to break them up into smaller groups. In this case, I used 4 small groups. Okay, so I take that group of 24, break them into 4, and I assign each small group a small portion of the large list. So you remember earlier I said I don't care how many projects they put on that list. That's because I'm going to have these small groups break it down now. So if they put 500 projects on that list, well, that's great. Now these 4 groups are going to each sift through 125 projects each to start finding the projects that are most important. All right. These small groups are going to do that work for us. So in this scenario, I assign the first group a list that contains projects Albuquerque through Dallas. The second team has Denver through Lincoln. The third team has Long Beach through Portland. And the fourth team has projects Raleigh through Wichita. Now, I try to put these people in groups so they can discuss projects that are important to them or from their business area or their department or whatever. But that's not always the case. I always try to put IT people in each group, and I try to put business people in each group, and I try to put someone in each group who might be familiar with the projects that are on the list that they've been given. And now I ask them to take some time and start sifting through their list, and as a group, come up with the top 3 projects on their list. Okay, so if you have Albuquerque through Dallas, come up with the top 3 projects on that list of Albuquerque through Dallas. And I don't give them much more criteria than that. I ask them to work it out as a group. Now, remember, we just had a discussion where they said maybe mandates are important or division priorities. I'm leaving this up to the small group at this point. I am not over managing this process. I am giving them time to discuss and come up with the top 3 projects on their list. I might also tell them, don't worry if you don't get all of your top projects, that's okay. We just want the top 3 or the 3 you think are the top at this time, but if you make a mistake, the process will give you an opportunity to correct it. So small groups, each group now has a small list, and each group is looking for the top 3 projects on their small list based on whatever discussion or criteria or whatever they choose in their group. It's up to them. They are the experts, not me. Okay? So our group spent their time sifting through their list. Group 1 chose Atlanta, Boston, and Dallas. Group 2 chose Denver, Detroit, and Fresno. Group 3 chose Los Angeles, Miami, and New York. And Group 4 chose Reno, Seattle, and Tucson. Okay, so each group broke their list down and came up with what they think are the top 3 projects on their list. And right about now, you're getting some people who are complaining and saying, man, we don't like this project. This is crazy. We didn't have enough information to do this. We're just guessing. That's fine. Subconsciously, they're right where we want them to be. And they're really probably not happy at this point. In fact, a lot of the groups I work with the first time are not happy at this point, but they will be. Trust me. Okay? So the next step then is we want to initiate the forced ranking, and I'm going to take just a few minutes to talk about that. The reason I wanted only 3 projects from each group is because I want to control the number of projects I bring up and put on the wall. One of the things I didn't mention earlier is that we are literally those projects on the list that I gave them. Typically, what I'll do is I'll give them a list of the project names on half sheets of paper. Okay, which is why I like to keep it from down to 3 to 5 words if I can. And I might give them another list with the description. And I'm only giving the reason I only want 12 projects to come up to the wall. Literally, I'm going to pick up those half sheets of paper of their top 3 from each group, and I'm going to literally stick them on the wall. And you can do that by writing these on large post-it notes and stick those large post-it notes on the wall, or you can do it by using what we call the sticky wall, where we take a big nylon wall and we spray it with 3M sticky spray, and then the sheets of paper just stick right on the wall. I literally take these projects that they give me and I stick them right up on the wall. So we have to do that for forced ranking. Then second, I'm going to explain the voting process and the rules, because we are going to vote on these projects and I want them to understand the rules. Okay. Some of them are still going to be confused after we explain the process and the rules. That's okay. Now, next, I'm going to ask them to give a 30-second description for each project on the wall. So I will literally look at the first project on the wall and I'll say, okay, Albuquerque, 30 seconds or less, tell me why Project Albuquerque is important. And someone might say, well, Albuquerque is important because it's a mandate. Or someone else might say Albuquerque is important because it's the CEO's #1 priority to help the sales strategy. I give them just 30 seconds. We don't want to write a book. We don't have a lot of time. Remember, we have a huge list. 30 seconds to just share thoughts, opinions, and concerns on that project. Now, I give them 30. A lot of times they'll go 60. All right, but that's better than giving them 60 and having them take 5 minutes. Okay. Then we're going to start the forced ranking with a question. I'll explain that in a second. And we're going to rank just the 12 projects that are on the wall. So remember, we started out in this scenario with a list of 100 projects. We now have 12 projects on the wall. We're going to figure out the priority order for those 12 projects, and then we're going to go back and do another, what we call a round, and get more information. So we repeat the process. All right, so the technique is, and I'll show you this, we're randomly selecting 2 of the projects that are on the wall. We're going to compare them against each other. I'm going to read what I call the ranking question. I'm going to ask the group to vote on which project they think is more important. Okay, and in this case, we're going to say majority rules. And basically what happens is the winner keeps moving up the list until it doesn't win. And then when it stops moving, we slot it in and we just take another random project, start at the bottom of the list, and do the same thing. Now, it sounds like it would take a long time, right? But it really doesn't, because these groups just gave you their 12 most important projects, and we're only going to be comparing one against another. By the time we're finished with this list and we go back and we do another round, most of the projects they give us the second round aren't going to move very high up the wall. They don't really move very far because the groups do a really good job of figuring out what's most important. And you remember when I showed you the comments at the beginning and someone said small groups did a good job of picking the initial projects, as evidenced by the fact they didn't move very far? That's what we're talking about. Now, I want to show it to you so you can see it, okay? So, back to our demo. So, each of the 4 groups chose their top 3 projects, and they have them on these half sheets or sticky notes. And I'm going to walk around to each table and collect the top 3. They don't have to be in any particular order. I don't really care what, they just need to give me their top 3. Okay, so each group hands me their top 3 sticky notes, and I literally bring them up and stick them on the wall. And so now pretend this screen is my wall, and I literally stick them on the right side of the wall. Okay, as I mentioned, I give them 30 seconds to explain the importance of each project, and I explain the rules of voting. So in this case, I'm looking around the room. I say we have 24 experts who are going to be voting today. I already worked with the sponsor or stakeholder to figure that out. Okay, so that means in this case, it's going to take 13 votes or more. I'm sorry, 13 votes or a majority for the project to move up. If there's a tie, we're going to have the CIO break it. Sometimes I tell the groups if it's a tie, it just stops moving, and the project will keep moving until stopped. And people are looking at me at this point going, what the heck are you talking about, Reen? Next thing I do is I hang my question up on the wall because as facilitator, it's very important the way that I ask the question because we are trying to get people to vote and I want to ask the question the exact same way every single time. So in this case, my ranking question is how many people believe that Project X is more important than Project Y? Now you can play with the wording. Okay, you can say how many people believe Project X is a higher priority than Y, or how many people believe that Project X should be started before Project Y. However you want to do it. But I usually just go with something generic, like how many believe that X is more important than Project Y, or how many people believe that X should be ranked higher than Project Y. Okay, but I want to read it the same way every single time. So now I've got my rules and I have my question on the wall, and I will typically have another person watch the group so that they can count the votes while I'm moving the projects up and down the wall. All right. So I randomly grab the first two projects. I grab Miami and I grab LA. All right. Now remember, they've already told me why they think Miami and LA are important. So what I do is I read my question. How many people believe that LA is more important than Miami? And let's say 17 people voted and said that it's more important. And we already said that 13 or more wins. So that means I'm going to put LA over Miami. So we've already got our first two projects up there. We've got LA and Miami, and we know that LA is more important than Miami based on the gut feel of the participants. So I randomly grab another one and I place it at the bottom of the list to compare it against the project on the bottom. So I grab Detroit and I read the question again and I say, how many people believe that Project Detroit is more important than Project Miami? And my counter says two. So now what I want to do is I want to just double check to make sure that Miami really is more important because maybe people aren't voting or they're not paying attention or whatever. So I read the question again in reverse order. How many people believe that Project Miami is more important than Project Detroit? And I see there's 12. So remember at the beginning I said 13 votes or more or majority. So in this case, majority of people voted for Miami. So I'm going to say that Miami is more important than Detroit, and I'm putting Detroit on the bottom of the list, and I'm grabbing another project and starting at the bottom. How many people believe that Project Boston is more important than Project Detroit? 20. Well, I know that's majority, so I'm moving it up the list automatically. How many people believe that Project Boston is more important than Project Miami? 15. Okay, again, that's more than half the people in the room, so I'm moving it up the list. How many people believe that Project Boston is more important than Project LA? Only 11. Okay, so it's not a majority. I'm going to reverse it out. How many people believe that Project LA is more important than Project Boston? 12. Okay, so I'm going to slot Boston in under LA. LA is still my top project. So I rearrange the cards. I grab another one. How many people believe that Project Atlanta is more important than Project Detroit? 10. How many people believe that Project Detroit is more important than Project Atlanta? 10. We have a tie. Okay. So CIO says, nope, Detroit's more important. So I just put Atlanta at the bottom of the list. There's no reason to rank Atlanta against Boston or LA because we know already that Atlanta's not even as important as Detroit. So we're not going to spend any more time. We're just going to move right on to the next one. Okay, so how many people believe that Denver is more important than Atlanta? 16, so that one moves up. How many people believe that Denver is more important than Detroit? 16 moves up. Now in this case, maybe these people just left their hands up. Fine. How many people believe that Denver is more important than Miami? 7. Okay, how many people believe Miami is more important than Denver? 13. So if I know Miami is more important than Denver, I'm going to slot Denver under Miami and above Detroit. Okay. And I'm going to grab the next one. How many people believe Dallas is more important than Atlanta? 20. Move it up. How many people believe Dallas is more important than Detroit? 20. Move it up. How many people believe Dallas is more important than Denver? 20 still. How many people believe Dallas is more important than Miami? 12. Okay. How many people believe Miami is more important than Dallas? 6. So now I see that not everybody's voting. But again, I told them that the majority of the votes moves this thing up. So Dallas keeps moving. How many people believe Dallas is more important than Boston? 6. How many people believe Boston's more important than Dallas? Only five. So now some people aren't sure and they're not voting. All right. Um, some of the people I work with get pretty disappointed. Others say I'm one of the guys that says we're just gonna keep moving. If you want to stop this thing, you got to stop it. Okay, Dallas moves up. How many people believe Dallas is more important than LA? Six. And six people said LA is more important, so we go to the CIO. CIO said it's Dallas. So Dallas moves to the top of the list. All right. So you see how this works. So what we do is we continue this process until all 12 projects on the wall have been ranked. All right. So let's say we did this and all 12 projects on the wall are ranked. So now out of a list of 100 projects, we already know what the 12 most important projects are. But remember earlier I said there's always a chance we could be wrong. That's okay because we're going to do another round, and if people come up with some other projects they think are more important, they still have a chance to make it up into the top 12 or top 10 or top whatever you have. The other reason I try to keep projects on the board or on the wall less than 15 is because I don't want people to start focusing on too many projects at any given time or they get overwhelmed. So we're going to go another round. So I'm going back to my groups, and we did that ranking in a large group. So that was a large group that did the voting. Now we're going back to the small groups and we're saying give us your next three most important projects that are on that list you're working from. So each of them come up with their next three most important projects. I walk around and collect those. I stick them up on the right side of the wall. I do the same thing again. I ask them to take 30 seconds to explain the importance of each new project. So I'll say, Aurora, tell me why that's important, why we should be doing it. And someone will say, well, Aurora's, you know, blah, 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 blah. How about Austin? Why is Austin important? And they'll say, Austin's a dependency for Boston. And I'll say, okay, but remember, we're not worried about dependencies right now. We're just trying to figure out which projects are most important. We'll worry about all the dependencies later. I don't want you guys in this room to get bogged down with dependencies. Right now, I just want you to judge each project on its own merit and tell me its importance. Okay? So they go through, they give me the importance of each project. I randomly grab one and I start at the bottom of the list because I have no reason to believe that this is more important than any of the projects we just went through. Because if it were, they probably would have submitted it to me in the first round. So I grab Aurora and I ask the question, how many believe that Aurora is more important than Fresno? Okay, and we just keep repeating. Now, I repeat the number of rounds until the group is satisfied with the list. So you remember before I told you, I don't care if I start with an initial list of 10, 50, 100, 1,000, or an infinite number. I don't really care because I know that these small groups are going to be breaking these lists down and giving me the items that they think are most important, right? So if you have a list that has 100 or 200 projects, what we have found is that the groups might only want to rank the top um, 20 or the top 30 or the top 50. Generally, after they've gone through at least 2 or 3 rounds of ranking, they realize that they've already found the most important projects. They also realize that there's no need to rank projects 50 through 200 because they might only have the capacity to do projects 1 through 10 or 1 through 20. So this is where they might stop and say, okay, at this point, we know what the highest priorities are. This is where we're going to send these back to the architecture team, or this is where we're going to send these back to the PMO, or this is where we're going to send these back to whomever to get some estimates on these projects and maybe go through that list and figure out what the dependencies are and what some of the other work is that needs to be done to make these priorities happen. Okay, again, we weren't approving projects in this meeting. We were only prioritizing them, figuring out what the top priorities are. So if we know that Dallas is our top priority and we know that Irving and Garland are dependencies, then later on we might move Irving and Garland onto the list because we know those two projects need to be done before we can do Dallas, their dependencies. But for purposes of this meeting, we're just trying to figure out what the priorities of the ranking group are, and that's what we've done. All right. So, as I mentioned, a lot of times groups are going to be happy with their list and they'll decide not to rank all 100, 500, 1000, or whatever. A lot of times they're happy to just go with the top X number of projects. Okay. And now that we've got this list and it's prioritized and we know what the top um, 20 or 50, whatever number of projects are, it's really important that we compile the results. Okay, remember that was the last step. We need to get these results written and we need to talk about what we're going to do with our newly prioritized list. Because if you've never had a prioritized portfolio or a prioritized list, you might get stuck here. So it's important to write those results down and share them with people. But before you even do that, ask participants to voice any questions or concerns. Now, what you will find at this point in the process, people are looking at the list and they're going, yeah, that's actually a pretty good list. I kind of like it. Now, a lot of them were skeptical in the beginning, but now they're looking at the list and they're thinking that actually looks pretty good. All right, and I've seen that happen over and over and over again. They might not be happy with the process initially, but they are very excited when they start to see that list form. Okay. Number two, this might be a good time to just have an initial discussion about how you're going to address those dependencies. Are they automatically going to be put on the list? Do we make the assumption that those projects have to be completed before the priorities are completed? Talk about what you're going to do with those dependencies. Okay. And then discuss next steps. Let the group know whether this list is going to go back to someone else for approval based on your governance structure, or if it's going to go to someone for further estimates or more detailed estimates. Whatever you're going to do with that list, make sure the people in the room understand it, because they're going to be pretty excited now and they don't want that list to disappear. They want to see something happen with it. All right. Have your recorder write everything down and then send it out to people. Make sure you send a follow up. And one of the things I like to encourage my teams to do is in that follow up, let people know that this list is a starting point for discussion based on the experts who were in the room. It doesn't mean that some of these items won't change or be moved after we learn more about these projects, but this is just a starting point, okay? And send it out. So, those are the 5 steps that I use to prioritize any list without criteria. Again, number one, make an initial list. Number two, assemble the experts, also known as have a meeting. Okay. Number three, generate some discussion around those projects that are on the list and what kinds of um, subjective information we might use to start making decisions about those projects. Then, after you generate that discussion, initiate the forced ranking process. We only compare 2 projects at a time because it really allows people to focus and think about project A versus project B. Okay, if they're looking at project A, B, C, D, E, F and trying to figure out which one's most important, they're going to get really bogged down. Now, there are some other techniques I might use to speed the process up, but I want you to get used to the initial process here. So, and trust me, it works. And then last but not least, compile the results and even communicate the results. So those are the 5 steps that I use. Now, I realize this is the first time you've seen this. Okay, so I want you to go back and watch the video a couple more times and remember what our participants, these are real participants, have said after going through this process. Number one, a lot of the participants liked it much better than point values. And again, I have coached groups who have literally called. One time I had a group who called and asked if I would come in and help them prioritize criteria that they were going to use to evaluate um, some RFIs, right? Or RFQs. So they wanted to have a meeting to prioritize the criteria that they were going to use to prioritize the information they receive from the vendors. All right. When I asked them how many criteria they were looking at, they said 36. I asked them how many how many RFQs they had, and they only had 6. And I said, well, then why don't we just prioritize those 6 items instead of spending all the time arguing about the criteria? So we did that, and it took about 10 minutes to prioritize that list. Otherwise, it would have taken days for that group to argue about the criteria. So a lot of people like this better than point values. And even if you buy a tool that has point values built into it, then you are at the mercy of the opinions of the person who weighted the tool in the first place. So this works, and our participants have even said, many of them, that they like it better than point values. Now, you're still going to have some objective level people who hate it because it doesn't include point values, but this is a system for getting your list quickly if you don't have any other way to do it and you don't have enough information. If you have all the information, you're a mature organization and you have a really mature process of gathering information and your portfolio is complete, then go ahead and use point values. This is for people who are not there yet. Okay? The process was better than expected. Most people have low expectations or even are not excited to participate in this process, but then when they see the list, they realize that it was actually much better than expected. Okay? My favorite, it was very basic, but was very necessary. Again, remember the very first group that we worked on with this process, they had a list of about 200 projects, and we managed to get through that list of 200 projects and identify the top 30, I think it was, in less than 2 hours. So again, think about that. We sifted through a list of over 200 projects with only the project name, project description. We had about 13 participants, and we were able to get through that list and identify the top, I believe it was 30 projects in less than 2 hours. They were ecstatic. Okay. In fact, some of these comments came from them. We put in the preparation and planning that meeting to make sure that we know how to manage those small groups and help them be productive. And as I mentioned before, often the small groups do a great job of picking the first pairs, so you don't have to worry about round two or round three going very high up the list. All right, but people like the fact that their project has a chance to run up the list. So that's why I almost always try to do at least 2 or 3 rounds, because if I limit this to just one round, people, they don't appreciate the list because they're thinking, well, the first time I didn't know what we were doing, my favorite project didn't get up there, et cetera, et cetera. But if I go 2 rounds or 3 rounds, they had plenty of opportunity to try to influence their friends and get their project up on the wall. And if it didn't make it, it didn't make it. Okay? So, real comments from real participants. So, what are you going to do next? All right? Here's what I recommend. First of all, download the tip sheet or the worksheet from meetingtipsradio.com/rankit. You want to get that worksheet, and it has just the 5 basic steps with a few tips, but the information that you really need to know to get started. Okay, so download that worksheet, start thinking about planning a practice session or using this technique with a small group or a small list just to see how it works. All right. Second, if you have any questions, just send me a tweet at hashtag PM Meeting Coach. All right, so send me your questions, tweet them to me, and I will respond. I will get back to you, and I will help answer your questions. And if you're intrigued by this process or you like this process, do me a favor and go to meetingtipsradio.com/love rank it, and all you have to do there is click the tweet, and there's already a tweet ready and waiting with the hashtags and the link. You just blast it out to your peers and they can come and check this out. And I would really, really appreciate that. We want to get the word out, and we do this demonstration all over the place. We're working with a lot of different groups. We do training. We're happy to work with you, but we just ask in return for this excellent, I hope you think it was excellent, free content, that you just help us get the word out. And you do that by just doing a click to tweet at meetingtipsradio.com/love rank it. Send that tweet out for us. We really appreciate it. And as a bonus, if you send me a question at hashtag PM Meeting Coach, or you do a click to tweet, what I will do each week is I will go back and I will have a drawing, and I will select someone to receive a free hour of coaching. I will help you plan your session. So if you go out and click to tweet for me, I will enter you into a drawing for a free hour of coaching to help you plan your session, and we will help you get your list. So with that said, I would like to thank you for your time, and I look forward to hearing from you at hashtag PM Meeting Coach. Until then, thanks and have a great day.